Hello, I'm Mark Tucker,
And I'm Alan Furstenberg, and we are Two Voice Devs.
Two Voice Devs.
How's it been going, Mark?
It's been going just fine.
Always good to hear.
Yeah, how about you?
Going well, busy, which I'm sure you could relate to, but
Oh man, yeah, really busy.
we had some interesting feedback already on some of the sessions we've been doing the past couple of weeks, talking about some of the nitty-gritty items about how we actually implement things. And I figured we could kind of continue along that same vein.
That sounds good. One of the things I thought about is that the first thing that you hit as a user and one of the first things that you code as a developer is the welcome message, or what do you do when the app launches, and how do you take into consideration different variables, whether it's the first time that the users launch the voice app, well, subsequent time, what happens if the user hasn't launched it for a long time.
Yep.
So it's kind of new again.
Right. But, how do you deal with welcoming people in deep links? And, is that something that you need to consider that's important?
Well, that's true.
It's the literal, hello world question all over again, except we can't say hello world every single time.
That's true. So like on the Alexa side, you can, do your typical launch, just invoking your app by name, or you can deep link and do like a specific intent, like Alexa, open my app and then some phrase, and that could go deep link into it. And you could actually have a different behavior if it's kind of that deep link mode. You might be able to just give an answer and exit out, or you might want to switch into more back and forth conversation mode.
Right.
So that's an option.
If you're playing a game, you might go directly into a particular game, or at a particular point in a game, rather than starting them off from the beginning and giving the wider range of options. On the Google side, we have a main invocation event, and in addition to that, we've got global events, which can possibly be deep link. The ask whatever to something.
Right.
If that matches one of the global events that you've written, that'll get set. And we've also got a couple of what are known as built-in intents. So it can distinguish between whether you've said play a game and they've gotten to your event through the play a game built-in intent, or whether they're invoking it using open whatever. Right.
So when you're using open, or and that's interesting, because one of the ways that you start is use like talk to and the name of your Google action.
Mm-hmm.
How does open that same invocation name, or just play a game? I guess, how does that differ?
So the difference is all of the direct invocations, all of the open whatever, talk to whatever, start whatever. There are a couple more like that, but I think those are the main ones. All of those go through what's known as the main invocation.
Okay.
If I just say generically, hey G, I want to play a game, it will either prompt me with a couple of options or show me a couple of options or whatever, and then I can select one of those, and that will invoke the play a game intent. The difference between the main invocation and the various built-in intent invocations and your global intent invocations are all different, and they can be however you set that up to be.
Oh, that's interesting. And then like one of our first, maybe it was even our first, we talked about quick links and action links, which
yes,
I think
that was one of our first ones.
Assistant links, right?
Yes.
That's also another way to get in, and that could be a typical launch. So like in the case of Alexa Quick Link, then that actually is just the same as invoking it by name, and that's a launch. But then if you do a task link, which is kind of more of a equivalent to a deep link, then you actually have to specify a task, which could be an existing intent, or it could be some additional endpoint. And we've went through that whole thing.
I was going to say, and since then I've learned about intents and events. Now there's also something called a task.
Yeah. And
Okay.
that's when you're having, it's typically used when you have one skill call another skill.
Hmm. Okay.
But that's kind of how task links work, or I don't know what the official name. They're still kind of categorized as quick links, but there's additional stuff that you can pass with it. Just a typical quick link, you just pass in the skill ID, and so it just invokes it from the launch, and that's all you get to do. But if you wanted to include additional information along the lines of analytics, like where did this get launched from, like your web page or from Facebook or from someplace else, or if you want to pass some additional data and do something, then that's where there's like a more of a custom task that you have to create that then is the path that gets into your
Hmm.
code. And that could, like I say, turn around and just really call the same thing as an intent, or it could be something that's super customized.
And on the assistant side, I believe those will either call the main invocation or one of your custom global invocations.
Okay.
If if you have parameters, so it acts just like a deep link.
All right. So there's lots of ways to get into
There's lots of
this.
ways
So
to
there
get
might be,
started.
yeah, and so that might differ, right, depending on if you're and can you tell, I guess, where you're when you're coming from an assistant link, that's where you're coming from? I think there's kind of an unofficial way to know that going into an Alexa skill if it's like a custom task link, but not if it's just a typical quick link.
Well, if you're passing parameters, then you'd know where it's
Yeah,
coming from.
that's true. So you could even vary the intro based on where it was invoked or how it was invoked, potentially.
No, exactly. And that's a really common thing that you'd want to do. If they're just joining from just starting a link, you might want to welcome them from wherever they're coming from.
Yeah. I'm glad you found us from our website.
Right.
Let's continue on with your setup or something like that.
Right. If you've passed along information from what they've been doing on the website, then you'll certainly want to, you've got a little bit of information. You'll certainly want to say, let's continue with this. Or, in some cases you've talked about using secret codes or one-time nonces that
Yeah.
you'll pass along to to move a web session into voice. You've got history there already. You've already got context. This is the case where you want to use that context.
Yes, you want to reassure the user or the player that things are moving along, and even educate them a little bit so they're like, I guess they understand that this is the continuation. We're just, now we're going to finish up the setup and we'll be starting your game momentarily, or just keeping them informed, as transparent as possible about what's happening.
But so there's all of these options. Let's start with the most simple case, because amazingly enough, it's the case that people get wrong lots and lots of times still. And this is a brand new user. They start the skill or action by saying, open this awesome app. How do you handle that first time user?
Oh, it varies, but typically I do a short intro. So in some ways, it's maybe even longer than the welcome back. So it's like, welcome to such and such voice app. This is maybe a quick overview, a sentence as far as what this does. This is a game where you're playing as a spy that's trying to, so some context. So if maybe somebody just stumbled across this in the skills store or something, clicked on the link without reading anything that's in the game description, and you're wanting to kind of immerse them into the experience as quickly as possible.
Mm-hmm.
And then either give them a brief overview of some of the main commands that they can do, or ask if they would like to go and get started into a tutorial. And sometimes it's really nice way to or let's get going, let's, and then I'll have them do something that would progress them or actually exercise them using the main feature points, acknowledging kind of along the way, and then you start into the main main part of the app after
Yeah.
the brief tutorial.
One of the common questions I used to get a lot on Stack Overflow is, how do I have two different welcome intents? And, when you start drawing out what they mean by that, they mean, in some cases, they want to be able to, launch them directly into a tutorial. And in other cases, they've gone through the tutorial. They just want to present them with, here's where you are, what do you want now?
Yep. So what's the mechanism for that?
Yeah. Well, what's the mechanism that you typically use with Jovo? I mean, let's assume that we're storing the fact that they've gone down the tutorial or not in the user information.
Yeah, and that's exactly what I do. So in the some sort of either a flag saying that they've exercised the tutorial. Have they done the tutorial, true or false, and have it set to false by default. It could be the session counter that keeps track that we talked about before. So it could be like if the session counter equals 1 being the first time that you're in, then that might be the thing that you use and say, the first time in, we're going to do this, and every other time, if it's greater than that, then we're going to do some sort of different welcome message or intro into the voice app. So those are typically the two different ways, but then you can start getting a little bit more fancy with how long has it been since the last time that they've done it. If it's been greater than a month, greater than 2 months, whatever it is, then maybe we start back from the beginning and welcome them again, or maybe there's a third message that you get for welcome back, but after you haven't been here for a while.
Mm-hmm. So I guess this is logic that you write in Jovo. So this is part of the intent handler that you'd write. You do this checking.
Yeah, so you could do that, or there's actually a special event handler for when there is a new session or when there's a new user. So that's like the very first time.
Okay.
If it's creating the database, there is no user record, then you get a new user. I can't remember exactly the handler that I get, but that could be a place where I could check for it. Or every time that there's a new session, then I'm going to already at that point in time have the data that I've stored in the database be brought back in, read into the application, so it's already available off of my user. So then I can start checking that and see if there's something special I have to do.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah. On the multivocal side, I use the level mechanism that I have set up.
Right, I like that.
So, and I'll include some samples of how I have that set up. So I can, for example, put something in my configuration that just says, okay, I'm going to denote newcomer, intermediate, expert. And I will say newcomers are anybody who's been there once, only once, or this is their first time, or hasn't been here in over a month. And the intermediate will be the people who have been here up to 5 times. And the experts will be the people who have been here more than 5 times. And this designate that as levels, 1, 2, or 3, or whatever. Yep. And then just set what responses I want for each one of those. And
yeah, no, that's a great way to do it.
That's pretty much it. There, I don't. If all my welcome intent needs to do is just that, I don't even need to write a handler. I just write the responses up, and multivocal takes care of the rest.
Oh, that's nice. So it goes in and it checks to see if there's any special code for a specific handler, and if not, it just returns the view that goes along with that.
Yep.
Nice.
So and that's part of multivocal. So the other neat thing about that sort of thing is that I can adjust those levels later if I need to, whenever I see it necessary. And I can use those levels depending on if they come in via different ways. So if they come in via the play a game method, maybe I'll use the same levels, maybe I won't. Maybe I'll choose that opportunity to find a different way to talk about it.
It's true. And that's where we need our friends, the designers.
Yes. An
Focus.
excellent point is, as always, that, it's the designers that are really going to be helping us understand the different approaches, the different ways that people will visit us, and maybe how we need to respond differently in each of those cases. Trust your
Yep.
designers.
Yeah, it definitely trusts them, because it's going to be different if it's a game or a utility. Those are going to be two different, use cases versus some sort of a business app, or if it's something in healthcare or finance, there might be different requirements that you have to say specific information in certain ways or certain times. And then you throw in also, does this a situation where you're going to use account linking? So that could affect what your start flow looks like, or if you need something like a PIN security. So maybe there's, maybe it is a financial app and you're wanting to make sure that before they get their, bank account information, then they have to do a PIN. So like in some cases, when you start off, maybe the intro is a little bit of stats about the game, like, oh, your level such and such, where your score is this, and you're currently ranked. So maybe you can get that information, but maybe you can't do that in a case like financial. And maybe you'd want to jump right in and say, oh, here's your account information, or like you have X number of dollars in your checking account. But maybe you can't do that because you want to have it secured in addition, besides account linking behind a PIN. And so you want to make sure you do the PIN information stuff before you reveal any of that information that could be more private.
No, that's an excellent point. I think the notion of the fact that tying it to account linking, you're going to act very, very differently with something that's already linked versus something that isn't. And I know one of the design recommendations when dealing with account linking in general is you almost never want to say, hi, welcome to Super App. Please link your account now. You want to help them understand why they want to be there, why they want to link their account to you. So maybe in some cases that means taking them through the tutorial in a demo mode, or letting them try things out on example data. And then at some point saying, are you ready to actually try this? Are you ready to link your account so we can do this for real? And then the next time they join, the account is linked, so you can take action accordingly, and your welcome will be very different.
Correct.
And then if they return with a linked account after 2 months, maybe you say, well, good to see you again. And maybe you want to re-authenticate them. Maybe you don't. Maybe you want to verify that they know they haven't been there in a while. There are all sorts of things that you want to consider, and you want to consider a lot of them right up front at that welcome message.
Right. Yeah, and when things like that, in some cases the purpose of when they first start is to get them immersed and right into the action to begin with. Or maybe it's you need to build trust with them before you then go on to the next step where you're going to link accounts. So approach it with like, what do you want to try to accomplish after this launch experience? What do you want your user to know, or what thing do you want to have accomplished, so that's something that's going to be a positive experience and get more usage from your voice app? Because it really could, if it's a poor starting experience, that's the first impression, and people might not be back.
Yep. But if they do return, and it occurs to me, this is kind of important in some ways, treating them as if you know that they're returning and welcoming them back. So, on the first invocation, you might say, hi and welcome to whatever. Whereas on subsequent invocations, you might say, welcome back to whatever. And again, this is your design, this is a designer thinking.
Yep. But
that can be important. And as developers, we need to make sure that we can handle the designers when they say that. And similarly, if their account has been linked, we have their name. So it's a good opportunity to welcome them back, Mark. Yeah, good to see you again, Mark. These are little touches that the designers have certainly thought about it. And they will be turning to us to say, can we do this? And we can. We just need to make sure we know how.
Right.
You know, in the multivocal case, for example, the user information is going to appear as a user object, so I can just include it in the template.
And so that's where, knowing your tools, knowing what's available inside of the framework that you're using, or how to approach that different things will allow you and the designer to have a conversation as far as what's going to be a good user experience and what's going to be possible. There might be, in some cases, technical reasons why you can't call this API yet to have that be part of the intro information. So maybe you have to think about what's the next best thing then.
Yep. Or there may be cases where even if you have it, you don't necessarily want to address them by name, because sometimes that will creep the person out a little bit that you somehow got their name. So
Yeah.
these are all considerations.
Yeah, it's part of what they're used to, and there might be already an ecosystem of websites and mobile apps or other things that the users are already using or familiar with. And so some consistency across that into the voice would be something that would tie those together and maybe increase some trust or familiarity with it from the beginning.
Yep. So I'm trying to think, what else is good stuff to make sure people think about when people start out. One of the things that's interesting actually about the way Google approaches this is the main invocation is actually slightly separate from the first scene. So when using the action builder, you can determine when things actually start, and that's the invocation itself. And then where things happen, and that's the scene. So you can welcome them as part of the invocation. And then they're going to land on the first, on the main menu, for lack of a better way to put it. And in the future, they may return to that main menu. You don't want to welcome them in the main menu because they may end up there again later. But you do want to welcome them in the main invocation. And with Action Builder, you have the ability to do that.
Yeah, so on the Alexa side of things, there's basically, you get your launch request, which is different than your basic intent, which then is all your custom intents and some of the built-in intents as well. Or then you have the ending your session. So you basically have start, end, and then all the stuff in between. So it is a little bit different as well. But yeah, you're right. So it's good to keep that in mind, that keeping things separate from your launch, and also keeping in mind what you're going to do if you're doing a conversation. So like if you start from a typical launch, then it's usually the typical back and forth. You started the action or skill, and it's up to you to end it. It'd be kind of rude to start the skill and then ask for something and then immediately end. But if you're going to start into like a deep link situation, maybe you just forego the whole welcome start thing altogether, and you just answer the question like, what is your bank account status, right from the beginning, and then you just end afterwards.
No, that's
maybe it's just something that the use case is really just a quick question answer done, as opposed to carrying on a conversation.
Yeah, no, that's an excellent point, is that, exactly how you welcome really does depend on whether, the different invocation method or not. Sometimes, in a deep link, you may want to hang around, or you may need to hang around. Like if you're telling them their bank account is negative and asking them what they want to do about it is different than just saying, your bank account's good, have a good day.
Yeah.
So
exactly.
But you're right. It is very important to distinguish between those. Also important is if, they've asked a question and you just want to deliver that answer, you don't want your welcome message to be longer than the answer you're giving.
Right.
Hi there, and thank you for talking to us here at Friendly National Bank. We're always happy to serve you anytime you would like. Remember, just ask your skill to talk to Friendly National Bank. Your balance is $200. Have a good day. You're kind of going, just give me the answer. Come on. So yeah, all of these things are important, and there are technical implications on how we do them, but your designer should also be steering you in those right directions.
Correct. Well, I think we've covered the topic pretty well. I'd be really interested in other people on things that you do on the beginning of your voice apps, as far as the welcome message or welcome back, different ways that you vary it, some of the variables that you use to determine what message you give, or besides like a quick message and what do you want to do, or a tutorial, what other types of things do you do at the beginning?
Yep. And if you've got questions about ways that that you're doing it, that you feel you could do it better, feel free to reach out to us. We're on Twitter and always happy to talk, or leave comments on YouTube or in the podcast below. And we will talk about them another time on Two Voice Devs.
Two Voice Devs. Take care, everybody.
Take care, Mark.
Yeah, you too, Alan.